Something that I think my viewers will be fascinated with. You obviously know my background and where I came from. Back in New York, my dad was a major figure in the Colombo family, one of the five New York Cosa Nostra families. I followed in his footsteps to a great degree, became a soldier, a captain, and then my life, similar to yours, we were in a bad place, and we'll get into that. By the grace of God, we got out of it.
Yes. Amen.
But I think, I've spoken about so many things. I mean, I built this channel initially talking about mob stories and, the people that I knew and some of my relationships and activities that I got involved in. When I was in prison, I met with a lot of guys that were alleged Mexican Mafia guys. And we got along really well. My wife is Mexican. I mean, I love the culture. And so we got along really well, but I never quite understood if the organization was the same as we ran it in the Italian version of that. So I wanted to get into that a little bit because your story is fascinating. You've turned your life around by the grace of God. You're doing tremendous things over the past 25 years or so. And coming from where you came from, that's a very difficult thing to accomplish. I know that we're similar in that regard. But explain to me a little bit about the Mexican Mafia, the organization, how it operates, its structure. Is it similar to that, what we operated as Italians? I just want to get into that a little bit. I think my viewers will appreciate it.
Of course. And also, too, I just want to say that thank you for the invite, or as you say, for the sit down. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a pleasure and an honor, too, that you would, consider me and, of course, and also the Ministry of Victory Outreach that I represent. But in regards to the organizations, yours, of course, is the original. You set the standard as far as organized crime. It was, the Italian Mafia. And then you were born, of course, on the East Coast and began to flourish, grow, and develop and, basically put organized crime on the map. But here on the West Coast, years later, decades later, crime continued, of course, to develop and grow. And then, as far as the Mexican part of the mafia, known today as the Mexican Mafia, that began to be established and grow within the prisons. That's probably one of the main differences, Michael, is that you were born on the streets on the East Coast, and which is something very important. We were born mostly in prison, and addressing at that time more territorial problems, neighborhood problems, and that was more or less our birthplace in prison. And having said that, Mike, the mafia was limited. The Mexican Mafia, anyway, was limited for years just to the prison mentality. And I've talked to some other people. I met on the East Coast some mobsters that, not active or anything, but this, our pastor and founder, the late great Pastor Sonny Arcanzoni, knew. And, I would meet them and talk with them and he would introduce us, what he does, the streets, witnessing, sharing. So we were having some coffee one time, and they couldn't understand the concept of why are you guys so big in prison? You guys take over the prisons, and these are, mobsters from this side. And they would almost saying, like jokingly, well, hey, we got all kinds of prisons over here. We'll give you Rikers Island and Sing Sing. You could have it, But then I got it, though. I got their mentality. Like, they're right, really. Why do you want to, be strong and grow and multiply in prisons, And when all, just thinking, as a criminal, all the money's out here, on the outside. So you would think, they think, their mindset, I got it. They were thinking, well, why are you guys doing that? Get lawyers, get out, But what limited us at first was the very fact that we were born in prison and we come from, we called it a gang mentality. We took that gang mentality into prison and it just intensified And the Mexican Mafia was born from the creme de la creme, you could say, of the street gangs of that time. And it was in Southern California, beginning with Los Angeles. And from there, first it was just completely unspoken of, similar to the Omerta, the code of silence. Well, we had that too, that, you know, just wasn't unspoken. I mean, it wasn't spoken of, and it was just something that would be kept just to ourselves, you know. And then we would just we make our presence felt, but in action.
I have a question for all my friends and followers. Have you tried my wine yet? You know, in the last 2 years, we've made tremendous progress with Franzese wine, and it's really all thanks to your support, and obviously because people are finding out we have a great wine at a great price. In 2025, we aim to become a national brand, and I want all of you to be a part of it. Every bottle you buy, every story you share builds more than a brand. It fuels a movement. The story of our wine is one of people having second chances and of lives being transformed. That's the truth. So go to my website, franzesewine.com, and get your bottle today. Salud, my friends.
We began to grow around 1959, 1960. We were born there in prison, in a Tracy prison for young. They called it the gladiator school. They were born there and began to go to different prisons, Soledad and San Quentin and Folsom. And we began to get a little bit more notoriety in the prisons. And it began to be something to be feared and admired. And then finally, we were getting a little bit, you know, of respect and honor and meaning. And of course, everybody wants a reason for why they're here. You know, that was, speaking personally, that was my reason for existence, you know, was to be in a gang. And my gang was, you know, in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles, known as First Flats.
How young were you, or how old were you, I should say?
Well,
got involved?
when I was still in junior high school, so I think I was around 14, roughly around 14, maybe 13. And I got into the gang almost by accident, because one of the gang leaders, you know, wanted to, I guess, pressure me for some lunch money then, you know. And at that time, 25 cents, you know, it was a lot. You could buy lunch, right? So I said, I had that in mind, but the way he asked me, of course, you know, we got our pride and our egos. And I told him, no, it's not going to happen. So anyway, one thing led to another. I cracked him, beat him down. I didn't know that was their leader, you know. So from then on, I began to get a little bit more, you know, respect and a few more looks and, you know, admire you from the fellas and some of the girls. So that was cool. That was all right, right? But anyway, back to the organization, you know, I said, you guys were the blueprint, you know, for the world, really, as far as organized crime goes. And we were just trying to imitate that and then piggyback. And then eventually we got our own identity, Michael.
Did you have an actual structure? Like, obviously, we were very structured with our leadership and our membership and rules and regulations. Did you have the same?
In the beginning, Michael, do I call you Mike or Michael?
Nah, Michael's good.
Michael,
Either
good.
one.
Okay, Michael Franzese, forget that. Okay, got to get this right. But in the beginning, no, it wasn't really tightly structured. It was intensely loyal and violent, you know, because of prison and the neighborhood. So that was, if you were a violent person, an aggressive person with certain skills, let's say, then you already had a leg up, you know, in this organization. And they were intensely loyal, you know, territorial and secret. You know, we didn't want to be exposed, didn't want to be known. I'm talking about the pioneers. I came a generation later. But in the beginning, like in the 50s, 60s, that they weren't as thinking really to be looking for the big earners yet, the big money makers yet. And it was just more about having a meaning in life, having something to fight for, even to die for. And then, so that's one reason why, there's the Black Hand. And of course, that comes, I think the Sicilians came up with it.
Yes.
You would know better than me.
Yeah, it was Sicilian. Did you have to take any kind of oath of allegiance to the
Well,
life?
I have that tattoo still, the Black Hand, and the mark of, a made guy. And at that time when I took it, I thought it was the epitome of manhood. Growing up in East LA, and I arrived. That was our Princeton. That was my degree from Harvard, and I made it. I've arrived, and I'm nothing better than a homie growing up, in the gangs, and then becoming a made guy in the super gang of gangs, right? Basically, the oath was simply not really like one circumstance or a one-time thing. Again, like I said, the Mexican Mafia and our culture, a lot of us grew up in juvenile hall, in YA, in the systems. And so we knew each other pretty well. So by the time we became young adults, men, we pretty much, we knew who, who was who had a good name, who had who could be trusted. And then we had access to, of course, our C files, and well, you know a little bit about that. I believe we did in one of our hotels there in Cali, right?
Yeah.
But it was more or less an association, an identification, and an acknowledgement. And when your name would come up for membership, then it would have to go around to all the prisons then, and then to a few of the brothers that were outside, and to see if they would raise their hand, And if one person said no,
Well, see, that was very similar to us, Art.
Oh, really?
When somebody was proposed for membership, just before that ceremony would happen, your name went on a list, and it was put around to all 5 families. And if anybody objected, then they'd have to state a reason why. You'd have an opportunity maybe to confront them on it. But so we did the same process.
Okay.
And obviously security reasons, that's why we did that.
Of course.
And I can relate to something that you said, when you finally did become a member, it was exhilarating. I mean, the night I took an oath, back in 1975, to me, it was like, wow, I had worked as a recruit for 2.5 years to become a member. And that night was like the biggest thing in my life up to that point.
Celebration.
So I get it, yeah. Salute to that. We're drinking soda instead of wine right now, but it's okay. A lot of people think that we take that oath, it's an oath to lie, steal, cheat, and kill. It's not. It's an oath to remain silent. We're never supposed to, like you stated earlier, we're never even supposed to admit the life exists, obviously never betray it. As part of that life, you do all of those things. You do some terrible things, there's no question, but that's not the oath. The oath is to remain quiet. But we were told there's certain rules that we couldn't break. God forbid you ever violate another man's wife, daughter, sister, mother, death. That could result in death. You betray the life, death. You could never raise your hand to another made guy, no matter what the circumstances are, serious consequences to that. I'm wondering, in the Mexican Mafia, did you have certain rules that you had to follow?
Pretty similar. The pattern is the same. That's why I said you guys had the blueprint for power of organized crime and families, and our concepts and principles were basically the same, Michael, about always respect the family, the wife, the children, certain things you didn't violate, children or any of that kind of stuff. That was instant death, No questions, no debate, it's a wrap. And so there's certain boundaries you would never cross, things we call honor.
Right.
You don't do those things. If you do, then, you're going to pay. But you'll pay. It's not like today, home invasions and house invasions and all that nonsense that, innocent bystanders and grandma gets a bullet because she's, you know, in the house when they're after a certain person, all that would not have happened, you know, back in my time, you know. So there were certain things that were never, ever done. Striking a maid guy, you would never do that. And if you had a beef with someone, you would take it to, then later on they developed the table or the mesa.
Right.
You know, and they would go to the table and, well, let's talk. So-and-so is going to his head. Man, he's going in my territory, my guy, he's taking over my prison or my neighborhood. You know what I mean? So you know that agenda, we'll say, right?
Yeah. So basically, they were very similar in that regard. And like I said, a lot of the guys that I met in prison, we had conversations about it, and repeating exactly what you just said. My friends, if you enjoyed this video, I'm going to give you an opportunity to become my partner in business. Franzese Wine experiencing tremendous growth over the past couple of years, and we're going to experience even further growth in the next few years. You're going to have an opportunity to be my partner because you've been supporting me, you've been my fan base, and I want to share this with you. So go to invest.franzesewine.com, and offer you shouldn't refuse.